For every problem there will be many ideas. But for any idea to fructify and sustain in a democracy like ours, it has to be politically acceptable, socially desirable, technologically feasible, financially viable, administratively doable, judicially tenable, and emotionally relatable. So then I told her, Mataji, you don't have to give any money. This is free and you'll be all right, you'll go home. नहीं बेटा, मेरा तो ना भाई है ना बेटा है, मेरा कोई नहीं है इस दुनिया में. अब तो मेरी उम्र इतनी हो गई, अब मैं ऊपर वाले के पास जाऊंगी. And this carried on for 10-15 seconds, and then she made a very remarkable statement. She tells me, बेटा ऊपर वाले जाके एक बात जरूर कहूंगी, तुम्हारी स्कीम बहुत अच्छी है. Now, to me, when I narrate the story, I still get goosebumps. Here is a lady, not related to me in any way, old lady on her deathbed, wishing me well. What could be better than that? What could be a greater gift than that?
So today he will be continuing the talk series, and he will be speaking about ethics in administration. I would say he is the most authoritative person or an administrator to talk about this particular topic in this country, because he is known for his honesty as well as his efficiency. Most of the time these two terms don't go together. If somebody is honest, he is little hesitant to do things effectively. So he has a real rare composition of these two qualities, and he is, you all know about the call scam, right? And after the call scam, there is a policy paralysis, and he was the one who took up the strong action and made the call allocation possible in 2012. And he was heading the Ministry of Ministry of Education, and he has ushered the digitalization drive in the education sector. And he has also framed a policy for health security, and that policy is presently Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, and this program has later evolved into the present Ayushman program. And these are the certain achievements that he had achieved throughout his 37 years of career in IAS. And he has also written this wonderful book called Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant. It's a recommended volume for all those who are preparing for civil service. It comprises of around 80 stories with which he tells about the ethical dilemmas a civil servant will confront and how to resolve that. So I would strongly recommend all of you to buy this book through Amazon. It will be useful. And since you have a lot of time for the prelims exam, now this October and November month, you can go through some of these chapters, and it's rich in ethical vocabulary, and also you can score better in case studies. Presently, today he will be talking about the issues and dilemmas a civil servant usually face. And he will be talking from his experience in the service for the last 37 years. So we are glad to welcome him again for this section. Thank you so much, sir, for joining with us.
Right. So what I'll try and do today is take you through my journey as a civil servant and touch upon certain ethical issues that I faced as I went along in my career, for you to understand how to approach an ethical issue, because it's a GS4 paper. And as luck would have it, a couple of case studies that have come in the past 2 years have been a slightly morphed version of what I have written in my book, and I'll allude to those case studies. But that is not material whether a specific case study has been asked in the examination. What is more material is how you approach an ethical issue. You know, that's very, very important. So when I take you through this journey of how I managed to overcome these ethical dilemmas, or how I handle these ethical dilemmas, the idea here is for you to understand as to how any dilemma can be approached. If that clarity comes to your mind, I can guarantee that you will be able to answer every question that comes in the ethics paper. Day before yesterday, I was discussing the case studies that had come this year in ethics. Understand the logic behind it, you will be able to crack it. Now with these words, I'll take you through this journey as a civil servant. Before I joined the IAS, I was in the police service. And I did want to become an IAS officer, so for me it was some sort of a failure not being able to make it to the IAS. Now I'm mentioning it here because yesterday also I mentioned that failures are very subjective in nature. You know, for somebody, having qualified for the police service would have been a major success. But for me and my dad, who wanted me to become an IAS officer, was a failure. So failure is not absolute, or success is not absolute. It's how you perceive a particular event that it becomes. But anyway, I got into the police, and I distinctly remember one of my colleagues walked up to me, and this was not an ethical dilemma, this is just an incident I'm narrating to drive home a particular message. So one of my colleagues who was also in the police service walked up to me, and he asked me in Hindi, "Boss, I am unable to sleep during the night. Raat ko neend nahi aa rahi." So I asked him, "What happened?" He says, "Petroleum prices are going up." I said, "Yes, petroleum prices are going up, but by your not sleeping in the night, will they come down?" No, boss. देश की आर्थिक स्थिति पर कुप्रभाव पड़ रहा है. The Indian economy is being impacted by this increase in petroleum prices. I said, I agree with you. The point that I am trying to make here is, by not sleeping in the night or spending sleepless nights, will you be able to impact the Indian economy or the petroleum prices? So after some argument, he came around and agreed with me. Yes, I think I should discuss it, but not unnecessarily be hassled about it. He goes back. He comes to me after 3 months again and says, "Boss, I am unable to sleep during the night." I said, "What happened?" "The petroleum prices have come down on their own without your intervention. So what is the problem now?" Then he tells me, "Boss, the population of India is going up." So my suggestion to him was, why don't you sleep in the night, it will be all right. See, the point that I am trying to make here is, friends, note it carefully, that don't get hassled over issues over which you have absolutely no control. Why? Because by being hassled over those issues, you will not be able to spend time on issues over which you have control. Time is limited. And yesterday I talked about time management. This is one of the biggest wastage of time, mulling, brooding over issues over which you have absolutely no control. Think over it, how much time do you waste on issues over which you have absolutely no control. So I got into the IAS, and I was posted as sub-divisional magistrate in a district called Hardoi. You wouldn't have heard of it. It's in UP. UP, from law and order point of view, is a pretty bad state, and this was probably one of the worst districts. But things were apparently fine. In 1984, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, who was then the Prime Minister, was assassinated. And all hell broke loose after that. You know, members of the ruling party were indulging in arson and looting in the context of a particular minority community. It was pretty sad state of affairs. So I got moving. I used to actually keep awake through the night and, you know, drive around to give, you know, sense of security to these people. So while doing that, I got some information that one of the most powerful MLAs, now a similar, what I am telling you, a similar case study has come last year. So very powerful MLA was behind all this arson and looting. So the dilemma that I faced was, should I take action against him or not? Now I am talking of these dilemmas which are not purely legal in nature. You must understand the difference between ethics and law. If you do anything illegal, there will be punishment. But if you do something unethical, there is no corporal or physical punishment or financial punishment. It's a matter of conscience. So that's the difference between ethics and law. When that ethics gets codified as law, it becomes a law. So here, if I had not taken action against that MLA, it wouldn't have been illegal or legal. If I had taken action against him, that's also nothing to do with law. It had to more do with conscience. Because I did feel that this MLA, if he is behind it, some action should be taken against him. After debating for a while, I made out a case under National Security Act against the MLA, and National Security Act prescribes that if you have such an apprehension and if you have reasonable evidence, not clinching evidence, that a person is indulging in something which can impact security, you can put him behind the bars for a year. It is called preventive detention for a year. But the decision-making authority in this case was the district magistrate. You call them collectors here or district magistrates? Collectors. So collectors had authority. So I sent this file to him. Now this MLA got the wind of that. And he was very upset and annoyed because he was very powerful. No one had the courage to take action against him. So he went to Lucknow, which is the state headquarters, like Trivandrum is for Kerala, Lucknow is for UP. And he probably complained to someone. Now I was immediately summoned to Lucknow. Now as a young officer, I thought I had done the right thing. And being summoned to Lucknow to explain my conduct, I felt very bad. So I drove down to Lucknow. It's about 120 kilometers from Lucknow, this district. On reaching Lucknow, I met the concerned officer. He said, why did you make out this case? So I explained the background to him. He tended to agree with me. But then he advised me to withdraw the file. That is the case this year in the ethics paper this year. There is a case where an officer is asked to withdraw a file. And I was asked to withdraw a file. I told him, sir, I am not the decision-making authority. The district magistrate is the decision-making authority. He can reject my case. Now, whether I withdrew the file or didn't withdraw the file has nothing to do with law. It was ethical, whether I should. And right through my book, if some of you get an opportunity to read it, in every case that I have given, I have not said what I did was right. I have only stated what I did. I have left it to the reader to decide whether I did what was right or wrong, because right or wrong is determined by your personal value system. And that is why I say that value systems may vary from individual to individual. What I may think right may not be right for you. So I may be a non-vegetarian and it's okay for me to eat non-vegetarian. For you, you are a vegetarian, you think non-vegetarian eating is not correct. So there is a difference in value system. But in my book, I don't say this is right or that is right. I say this is my value system. This is what I did. Call you have to take in terms of what you think is right and wrong. So I politely told him, sir, it may not be appropriate of me to withdraw the file. Since I've sent the file, let him take a call. And with this, the conversation ended. I came back to my district and I was transferred out. I was distraught. As a young officer, I thought I had done the right thing, and I was undone by somebody who thought what I did was not correct. So I got transferred. I moved out to another place. Now look at what happened 7 years down the line when I myself become a collector and a district magistrate in a district. Here, in those days, the Ram Janmabhoomi agitation was going on. It was very tense in the district. But I had developed a reputation of being strict, of taking action against anybody who did that, irrespective of his political affiliations. So fortunately, this district was comparatively calm as compared to surrounding districts where they had to impose curfew. You understand what a curfew is? It is under section 144. You prevent people from assembling or gathering together. So I didn't have to impose that curfew in my district called Lakhimpur Kheri. Again, as luck would have it, a murder took place. So the district president of the ruling party wanted to take out a funeral procession. Now I was sure that if he is going to take out this funeral procession, there will be riots in this district, because it was very communally charged. So I tried to reason out with this person as to why do you want to take out this procession? This is your government. And if there are riots, the government will get a bad name. But he didn't agree with me. He said, no, we'll take it out. So I took the decision of putting behind the bars. At that time, I had become a district magistrate, arrested him under preventive detention, put him behind the bars. Not an easy decision, but I took it. Late in the evening, the chief minister called me up. He asked me why had I put his man, he said, my man, behind the bars. So I explained to him, I told him, sir, this is your government. Had he taken out this funeral procession, there would have been riots and the government would have got a bad name. Then he asked me, isn't there any way that you can release him? So I told him, sir, I have nothing personal against him. If someone can speak to him from your side or from Lucknow to tell him that this is not done, he should not be taking out this procession because it will impact the law and order. The chief minister didn't appear convinced and he put the phone down. So I told my wife, going by my past experience, that you be prepared, I'll be transferred out. Next morning, I get a call from someone telling me that the district president has agreed not to take out a funeral procession. So I had nothing personal against him, I released him. But this is not the end of the story. 2 months down the line, the same chief minister who was so annoyed with me awarded me as one of the finest collectors of the district in the state for maintaining law and order. Now look at the two situations. Why am I telling you this is? when you approach any ethical issues, if you are clear-headed as to what you got to do, and over a period of time, I'll narrate some other stories to you, I gradually became absolutely clear-headed as to what I wanted to do. Yes, in the beginning of my career, I had this problem of my inability to decide as to which path should I take. So the dilemma did exist in the beginning of my career. But once I got some experience, I had absolute clarity of thought as to what would I do. So in this case, I was very clear. I would put him behind the bars because it will impact law and order. Purely from ethics, from GS4 point of view, look at this case study, you will have to take your own call. What were the options available before me? Not put him behind the bars or put him behind the bars, and then examine what are the possible consequences. To me personally, to the law and order situation personally, long-term consequences of what I was doing. That's how you analyze the question answer. I'm not going to those case studies, papers. Maybe sometimes later I can discuss how you can approach a particular case. But I'm just trying to explain to you that when a dilemma comes before you, especially of ethical nature, you have to look at the options that are available with you. Then you have to look at what are the possible consequences and then take a decision as to what you should do. If you can do that, you would have taken care of all case studies that come to you. In this particular case, I got rewarded for virtually doing the same thing for which I was transferred earlier. So gradually I was coming to understand karmanyavadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. You understand? You have control over your own actions only. Beyond it, you don't. You don't have any control. So you don't have any control. So focus on what you got to do. This has to do with your preparations also. Yesterday I was explaining, you don't really know whether you'll qualify or not. No one has any, only the astrologers, I don't believe in astrology, but they probably may have an answer as to whether you'll qualify or not. But that's not material. Only control you have is on this moment of the decisions that you take now. So you have to focus on now and prepare well. And I was gradually understanding it because when I was young, my mother used to tell me quite often that, why are you worried about results? I never understood the importance or implications of it. It's not that I'm not bothered about results even now, but I'm not obsessed with results. I'm more in the moment, preparing myself, and that is what I'll suggest to all of you. So I got rewarded. A few years down the line, I came to Delhi. I did a stint here in Delhi, and then I went back to the state again. This is 2003. There again, scene was pretty bad. I was posted as Secretary Horticulture, and my minister was extremely corrupt. So one day, he sent me a written order asking me to suspend a deputy director of the organization. Now, minister was legally competent to suspend an officer of that state. So the order was not illegal. Mind you, I'll keep reminding you about this aspect, because when we talk of ethics, we are not talking of legal, illegal. I mean, as an officer, I was clear in my mind, if any politician or for that matter, anybody asks me which is against the law, I'll not do it. So there was no doubt on that front. But there is a huge gray area between yes and no, between what is legal and illegal. And that, hopefully many of you will join the civil service, you will discover that is where your ethical values come in. There's no question of a value when a law says you got to do this, you better abide by that law, whether you agree with it or not. Whether your personal value system is at variance with law, it doesn't really matter. What matters is the law. But what we are discussing today is not law. We are discussing that gray area where you could go either way. Either way, it's not illegal. So the touchstone in that case is your conscience, not the law. So in this particular case, what had happened was, he sent me a written order asking me to suspend a deputy director of the organization. So since no reason was assigned for suspending that officer, I rang up the minister. I asked him, sir, you have asked me to suspend this officer. What is the reason? So he gave me a very funny answer. He tells me he hasn't come to meet me. I said, sir, this is too small a reason. But he didn't listen to me. He put the phone down. So I was flummoxed. I didn't know what to do. That's the dilemma. What do you do? Then I found out about that officer. And everyone told me, sir, he is very honest, very efficient. Then the dilemma became even worse. Here is a legal order with me, and here is a honest and efficient officer. Now, what are the choices available to an officer in that? Suspend him or not suspend him? And you have to look at the most consequences. But more than that, if you are not going to suspend a legitimate order, or if you are not to comply with the legitimate order, you could come to grief because it's a legitimate order. So what do? You look at the other provisions of law. So there is a provision in UP, and I'm sure it must be in other states also, that if you disagreed with the minister on a particular issue, you could route the file through the chief secretary. So I spoke to the chief secretary. I had worked with him, I knew him, very fine officer. So I told him the background, I told him here is an honest officer and the minister wants to suspend him because he did not meet him for obvious reasons. Let me explain this to you. In my book, Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant, I talk about 3 types of corruption. And they are Urdu words, but I'll explain them to you. One is Nazrana, Shukrana, Jabrana. Nazrana is when you give an offering without expecting anything, like you do to Almighty Lord, you give. And then Shukrana is thank. You ask somebody for a favor, he does it, he gives it. Jabrana is when you use your danda, what a police wala sometimes does, to recover. So this was more of a Nazrana. They expected an officer to go and give his offering to the minister. So I told, when I explained it to the chief secretary, he said, you send the file across to me, we'll see what we can do. So here, I was trying to make use of that rule to find a way to protect this officer. Now, remember this term, protect the officer. I'll come back to this because that is something which I did throughout my career. To me, ethics is much beyond financial honesty and dishonesty. To me, protecting your team and your officers is ethical and not protecting is unethical. Now, there is no law here. If I had protected that officer, nothing illegal. If I had not protected officer, it's nothing illegal. Again, it's your value system. My value system was that if my officer has not done any wrong, I will travel any distance to protect him. So when the chief secretary told me, I made out a case clearly explaining that it may not be appropriate to suspend an officer for not meeting the minister and send it to the chief secretary. Now chief secretary sat on the file. Red tape is not always very bad. Sometimes it helps. But what this minister did was, he asked me, I told him the file has gone to the chief secretary. So he waited for a while and then he met the chief minister. As a consequence of which, I don't know what transpired between them, I was transferred out. So when I was transferred out, in the first instance that I mentioned to you, I felt terrible when I was transferred out. Here, I was indifferent because I had evolved to the level that transfer or no transfer is not in my hands. So, but the chief secretary was very upset. He called me and said, Anil, in order to protect that officer, I don't know whether you will be able to protect him or not, but you have been transferred. So I said, sir, why are you worried? He was worried on my comment. I said, sir, there's no point to be worried. For me, transfer is like death. It is inevitable. For a civil servant, transfer happens. Something which is inevitable. Why should you bother about something which is inevitable? So he started smiling. And then I added, I said, sir, in any case, sir, I believe in Hindu philosophy. You're not going to kill me. You're not going to throw me out of service. You're going to post me somewhere else. So I'm going to be reborn. I'm going to do the same thing all over again. How does that make a difference? So he smiled and the case was over. Let me tell you what happened thereafter, because of course I joined the other organization, but to this officer, he was not suspended. The orders were not issued despite a legitimate order of the minister. And as luck would have it, last week I was in Lucknow and I met the same officer. He is now head of the department, director of horticulture. Imagine the sense of satisfaction you derive out of following your own value system. Now, when you write an answer, you have to look at the immediate consequences and long-term consequences. I got into this habit of protecting officers who were correct. And I am reaping the benefits of that now, post-retirement. How? Because, I'm not boasting. I ring up any officer who's worked with me and ask him to stand on one foot. He will stand on one foot now when I have no control over him. And he will put it down only I tell him to put it down. That is the loyalty that you get out of following a particular ethical value system. That's the reward part of it. The punishment part was transfer. Now then you have to perceive whether you want to perceive transfer as a punishment. Initially, when the first incident happened, I perceived it as a punishment and I felt terrible inside. In the second instance, I found it a routine. I didn't feel bad about it at all. I took pride in the fact that I protected an officer. Now the objective reality was the same of a transfer, but I transformed or changed myself in a manner that I had a different feeling towards it. Yesterday I was telling somebody that you cannot annoy me unless I want to get annoyed. No? Some people get annoyed quickly, some people don't get annoyed quickly to the same thing. So it does not depend on what is happening outside, lot depends on what is happening inside. So you find so many people who are absolutely cool. Like I remember I used to get very agitated at getting stuck at traffic jams. Very agitated. How many of you get agitated? Traffic jams? None of you. Oh wow, you are wonderful monks, yeah. Huh? I mean, you should say, yes, I do get agitated. You know, unless you accept what you are, you will never be able to change. Accept it. Why? Because each one of us, no one is perfect, no? Each one of us has problems. People who improve and evolve as better persons are those who accept their shortcomings. No harm in accepting shortcomings. Do it publicly and then work towards improving it. I had that shortcoming. I used to get very agitated getting stuck in a traffic jam, and Delhi is pretty notorious for that. So, right in the beginning of career when I got married, I was traveling with my wife, and again I got stuck in a traffic jam and I was tearing my hair out. Now I don't have much hair now. It's not as a consequence of tearing my hair out, but other reasons. But at that point in time I had a good crop of hair. So my wife asked me, can you do something about this? I said, what can I do about it? I said, if you can't do anything about it, why are you unnecessarily agitating? You should be agitated over issues over which you have something control. By just getting agitated, you're not solving any problem, you will only make life difficult for yourself. You will find so many people, they just coolly listening to the music, let the crowd go away. There are others who will keep shouting, what's happening? What you see that ad of Rahul Dravid, I don't know if you saw it. He comes out of his car and is shouting. No, that's the true picture of us. So you have to evolve as an individual. I was gradually evolving as an officer who was not getting agitated at such issues. So I got transferred to an organization called Pickup. It was the State Financial Corporation. This corporation was one of the finest public sector companies in the country. But then it fell from grace. It made losses for 7 years, and my job was primarily to wind it up. So when I walked into this office, I felt I was walking into a graveyard. Because everyone felt that this organization will go, this guy has come to wind it up and we lose our jobs. I was also very worried. I didn't really know what to do. But I got a good idea. I got an idea, and let me share this with you, and those with finance background will understand. I'll quickly tell you what it is. Those who want the details are there in the book. What was happening was this financial corporation was taking credit from SIDBI and then lending it to industrialists. Simple. But these industries were becoming sick, so they were entering into a one-time settlement wherein they were writing off all the interest and settling the entire amount for just the principal. Okay? And to the creditors, that is SIDBI, they were only paying interest. Now those of you with financial background will understand that this was screwing up the balance sheet, because the liabilities were still there and assets were getting liquidated. So they were making losses. My idea was, how about reversing it? How about taking some interest from industries that are sick and asking SIDBI to write off my interest. We owed SIDBI 250 crores, this is 2003, out of which 170 crores, yes, 170 crores was interest and 80 crores was principal. So idea was, can we do that? Now, as you would have already discovered, though not articulated in the manner that I am going to do right now, it's very easy to have ideas in this country, no? You talk about COVID, go down the street, everyone will tell you, why didn't government do this, why didn't, everyone will tell you, do this, do that, do that. For every problem, there will be many ideas. But for any idea to fructify and sustain in a democracy like ours, it has to be politically acceptable, socially desirable, technologically feasible, financially viable, administratively doable, judicially tenable, and emotionally relatable. Now it's a handful. It's not very easy. Now I have a separate session on how to make things happen in the government where I discuss each of these ideas. I'm not going into the details. Maybe some of you who are appearing in the civil service can pick up one part of it and write an essay. That an idea to fructify and sustain in this country has to be politically acceptable. Write an essay on it. If you can do that, you will do very well in civil service. Because again, I am not talking about essay writing. You should be able to write on any topic. And this does not require too much information or knowledge. Your ideas, if you can do that, you will be able to write that. So coming back to the pickup story. So I got this idea, how about taking some interest from them and writing off. Now I started implementing it. First thing that I did was, I discussed this idea with all the officers at the headquarters. There were 300 strong officers. I discussed with them. And they all agreed, sir, this is brilliant. Then we'll be able to get some interest. And if we don't pay the interest, we will become profitable again. So I made out a strategy and started working on it. This strategy was, first I spoke to the managing director of SIDBI. He came online. So I asked him, we owe you 250 crores, out of which 170 crores is interest and 80 crores is principal. If you write off 170 crores, I'll pay your 80 crores. No, he hit the roof, because 170 crore writing off would mean loss for him, because he writes off the interest. So he said, how can you do that? Now I had done some research, and this is a suggestion to all of you, whether you become civil servant or not. Whenever you go and talk to somebody, do your homework properly. I had done my homework. I told the managing director of SIDBI, you do it in the same manner as you did it for 15 private sector entities. You have written off interest for them and settled only for principal. He did not realize that I had done that. So I said, so he said, but they are private sector entities. I said, why are you discriminating between public and private sector? No, sir, how can I do that? Then I told him, and then I did something which I think was unethical, but I did it. I told him, you have not researched about me. Before I joined the IAS, I was in the police service. 2 of my batchmates are directors in CBI at a lower level, deputy director. All I have to do is to write to them, merely stating that you have written off interest for these 15 entities, private sector, and you are saying no to me. Now this was a shot in the dark, but hit the nail on the head. He panicked immediately. Oh, what are you saying? I said, if I am telling you anything wrong, you tell me. Haven't you written off interest of 15 private sector entities and you are saying no to me? Then he said, okay, give me some time, I will come back to you in 2 days. He said 2 days. Next morning he rings me up and he tells me, if you pay me 170 crores, if you pay me 80 crores, I'll write off 170 crores. Now this was unthinkable. I couldn't believe it. But my problem was, I didn't have a single penny what to say about 80 crores. Where do you get 80 crores for? So then I go to Principal Secretary Finance of the state government. And a very fine officer, I go to her and I ask her, Madam, we owe 250 crores to SIDBI. And all these loans are guaranteed by the state. So if you don't pay those loans, then SIDBI has an option to go to the court and the treasuries will be attached and they will get the money from there. She said, yes, Anil, that's a very serious problem. What do we do? So I told her, Madam, I have done. She said, what have you done? Then I told her the story of my conversation. She couldn't believe that SIDBI MD has agreed to write off 170 crores. So she immediately, within 48 hours, gave me around, I think, 30 crores, which were paid to SIDBI, on which we got an interest remission of around 60 crores. Balance sheet was again looking good. But I had to recover the other 50 crores. How do I do that? There again some ethical issues came up. So I called the most corrupt general manager for a cup of tea. Now, can somebody give me a reason why did I call the most corrupt general manager for a cup of tea? Louder. He can do it in an ethical way. Yes. Any other observation? Why did I call the most corrupt general manager for a cup of tea?
There will no 100 ways to do it.
Sorry?
There will no more ways to do the things.
Say it aloud. You're right. Absolutely.
They will know the 100 ways to do the things.
You know, by that time I had discovered that every dishonest officer who's not gone behind the bars is an efficient person. Because if you're inefficient and dishonest, you are in trouble. These guys are very smart. You know, you must appreciate the fact of their smartness, their efficiency of corrupt people. So I called him. And I told him, there's hardly anything left in this organization. You can't get anything out of it. So he immediately was surprised. I'll tell you why. Because no matter how corrupt you are, to the public you will never accept to be corrupt. No? How many of you are corrupt? None. No one is corrupt sitting here. Yet we say there is so much corruption. Where is it coming from? Timbuktu or from British? You know, something good about our society, at least till now, is that we are not abrasive about our corrupt practices. We still try to hide them. So I told him, oh, let bygones be bygones. You heard me out. We are trying to revive this organization and you have to help me recover the remaining 50 crores. He said, yes, sir, I'll do it. Okay. And he got down to it. Again, to cut a long story short, within a few months, we recovered a lot of amount, paid back to SIDBI, and for the first time in past 8 years, this financial corporation made profits. When they made profits, there are many of my colleagues who wanted to occupy my place. You know, so far it was troublesome. Now there's a lot of good things available here. So I was transferred out. Somebody else occupied my position. It didn't really matter to me. As I said, by which time I had become indifferent to transfers. I didn't cause them, but if I were transferred, so be it. But I kept track of this officer, this general manager, and people used to tell me, sir, he's become totally honest. He doesn't take a single penny. He keeps working hard. He's benefiting the organization. I mean, I found it very incredible. But I called him for a cup of tea again, this time at my residence. And I asked him, everyone appreciates you. What have you done? How did this change come about in you? I asked him a very blunt question. Then he made a very interesting reply. He said, sir, when you used to appreciate me in front of 300 officers patting on my back and telling everyone that all the improvement that is coming about in this organization is because of this officer, sir, meri to chhati chaudi ho jati thi. You know, I used to feel so proud. And the kick that I got then, I never got it before. This term kick I have used in my book. So this guy had changed. He may not have changed. You know, I am talking today to you about success stories. There have been many failures in my life. This is one such success story where an extremely dishonest officer, but extremely capable officer, I don't know whether he became honest or not, but he was instrumental in transforming this organization. Then I came to Delhi and started a scheme called Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, which he alluded to in his introduction. Is rated as one of the finest schemes in the world. To begin with, there were many problems, many problems to begin with, but over a period of time, it came to be recognized world over as one of the finest schemes of the world. In fact, the World Bank offered me to do this scheme in 15 countries of the world, and they were offering me $1,000 a day for that. I didn't go. Because if I were to make money, I need not have joined the IAS. There is so much else to be made as an IAS officer, as a civil servant, which I am reaping the benefits now, post-retirement. I keep telling youngsters, and when you qualify and I talk to you at the academy, I'll tell you, your true worth will not be determined when you are a civil servant. Your true worth will be determined when you've retired, when you are a nobody. And I'm reaping the benefits of what I did then. So I stayed back in the country and continued to implement the scheme. As I said, the scheme came to be recognized by the World Bank, the ILO, the UNDP, one of the finest schemes in the world. Around that time, Mr. Obama took over as president of the US. And US was having serious problems with their own insurance scheme. So one of the advisors to Obama, he rang me up. Mr. Swarup, can you come over to the US and make a presentation to us on your health insurance scheme? I said, India is a different country. The context is very different. What can I tell you on that? But he insisted. So in one of the visits to Washington, I used to travel quite often to interact with the World Bank people. In one of the visits to Washington, I made a presentation. The audience comprised officers from the US government, from the state government, from our own mission. There were also representatives of Gates Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation. Have you heard of these foundations? They give money to the poor countries. They give a lot of donation. So after my presentation, I was having a cup of tea outside. This gentleman from Gates Foundation walks up to me and asks me, Mr. Swarup, you are a civil servant, but you seem to be very passionate about the scheme that you are doing. What is the government giving you beyond your salary? A very interesting question. You will find many officers are very passionate about what they are doing. They get the same salary as others who are either corrupt or doing nothing. So I pondered for a while and then I asked him a counter question. I asked him, Gates Foundation gives millions of dollars to poor countries. What do you get out of it? He said, well, that's a job, but more than that, we derive a lot of happiness, satisfaction out of the help that we do to the poor? I said, you answered your own question. The RSBY, the Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, is meant for the poorest to the poor, many of whom would have been dead but for this scheme. So the good wishes of those that survived and their families come back to me somehow, anyhow. That's good enough a kick for me for doing what I am doing. You know, this kick word I picked up from that officer. It is a deep sense of satisfaction that you derive out of doing something where you may not have pecuniary or other benefits. But that sense of satisfaction is good enough. In my book, I have called them my Bharat Ratnas. So then I narrated an incident to him just to illustrate what I meant by that kick. I told him that in this scheme, RSBY, I used to visit these small hospitals. You know, these Apollos and Maxes were not empaneled, but small hospitals were. So I was talking to a beneficiary patient in a hospital. Suddenly I heard a very feeble voice from behind. Now, can I narrate this in Hindi? Because this conversation was in Hindi. Are you comfortable with Hindi, all of you? It's a simple Hindi. So he said, Beta idhar aao. Very softly, I turned around and saw a very old lady who could not sit. She was so old and emaciated that she couldn't sit. So I went to her, I bent down and I asked her, Mata ji, aap theek to hain? She tells me, Beta, main bahut takleef mein hoon, lekin in hospital walon ne mera bada khayal rakha hai. Do you understand this? The hospital people have looked after me very well. Then I said, फिर तो आप माता जी ठीक हो जाएंगी, आपने घर जाएंगी. नहीं बेटा, मेरा कोई घर नहीं है, मैं तो झोपड़ी में रहती थी. I lived in a hut and I used to beg. भीख मांगती थी. मैं बीमार पड़ गई, मेरा पड़ोसी था, वो भी भीख मांगता था. उसने तुम्हारा ये कार्ड देखा. It was a smart card based insurance scheme. ये कार्ड देखा और मुझे इस अस्पताल में ले आया. यहाँ सब मेरी सेवा कर रहे हैं और मुझसे पैसे भी नहीं मांगते, मेरे पास है भी नहीं देने को. So then I told her, माता जी, you don't have to give any money. This is free and you'll be all right, you'll go home. नहीं नहीं बेटा, मेरा तो ना भाई है ना बेटा है, मेरा कोई नहीं है इस दुनिया में. अब तो मेरी उम्र इतनी हो गई, अब मैं ऊपर वाले के पास जाऊंगी. And this carried on for 10-15 seconds and then she made a very remarkable statement. She tells me, बेटा ऊपर वाले जाके एक बात जरूर कहूंगी, तुम्हारी स्कीम बहुत अच्छी है. Now, to me, when I narrate the story, I still get goosebumps. Here is a lady, not related to me in any way, old lady on her deathbed, wishing me well. What could be better than that? What could be a greater gift than that? So, but each one of you, when you do become a civil servant or when you attempt a case study here, have to decide for yourself what is right and what is wrong. To me, ethics simply means your understanding of what is right and wrong, period. No complex. You know, I have been a student of political science. I don't teach Plato, Aristotle, St. Thomas Aquinas about ethics. No. You don't have to study these philosophers to understand what ethics is. You have to simply understand what ethics is, its implications, its impacts, and you will be able to attempt any question and answer them. So this is what that happened then. Of course, thereafter, as you see, there are dilemmas everywhere. You got to take a call. You got to take a personal call. You have to take a professional call. You have to decide what is good for you and then do what you think is right. Of course, thereafter, I became Central Provident Fund Commissioner, and then I was in the Cabinet Secretariat for a few months, heading Project Monitoring Group. This is a very interesting experience there. There also I faced some dilemmas. I was actually in Cambodia talking about this health insurance scheme when I got a message from the Cabinet Secretary. You understand who a Cabinet Secretary is? He is the top bureaucrat in the country. He is the topmost man. Normally, he would not talk to an officer of my seniority at that. But I got a message in Cambodia that the Cabinet Secretary wanted to talk to you. So I tried to reach out to him from Cambodia. I couldn't. So when I landed in India, I immediately rang him up. It was late in the evening. His personal staff put me across straight to the Cabinet Secretary. And then he said, Anil, can you come over for a cup of tea tomorrow morning? I knew him personally, but I had never met him when he became Cabinet Secretary. So I said, sir, if you tell me the issue, I'll be able to prepare and come. No, I just wanted to have a chat with you. No, Cabinet Secretary calling you just for a chat sets you thinking. And normally you think negatively. Why did he call me? So I went to my wife, none of you is married. If anyone of you is married? No, none. So I ask these questions when I address audiences that are, married. I ask them, when you are in trouble, what do? You go to the other trouble and find a solution to the trouble that you have. So jokes apart, I went to my wife I told her that cabinet secretary has called me, I don't know why he's called me. Oh, don't worry, everything will be fine. That's very comforting. Of course, I couldn't sleep during the night. It was a restless night. Next morning, I went to meet him. So first things he tells me is, Anil, you have been drafted for a special assignment. Now my heart sank because 2 years before that, I had been drafted to head the anti-Naxal wing in the country. But my minister did not relieve me, so I continued to work on the RSBY scheme. So when he told me that you have been drafted for a special assignment, I thought I am now being drafted for Kashmir, because there was a lot of trouble in Kashmir. So I tried to wriggle out. I told him, sir, my 7 years are over, and that's the maximum that you can stay in Delhi. You have to go back to the state. Now one thing you will discover when you join the service is that if you want something, you will be shown the rule. And if the government wants something, they will change the rule. So in my case, they changed the rule. They relaxed it by 1 year and asked me to head what was called the project monitoring group. Now the job of this project monitoring group was to fast track project. Each one of these projects was more than 1,000 crore. At a time when scams were breaking out, Commonwealth Games scam, coal scam, 2G scam, all scams were breaking out. So consequent to these scams, officers were not taking decisions on the files because they said that it's best not to take a decision. If you take a decision, you might be in trouble. So they were not taking this. So my job was to get those decisions going. So it was tough. So I told the cabinet secretary, sir, I could be in trouble because there is so much trouble around. No. Yesterday the Prime Minister, the Finance Minister and I met and we were looking for somebody and we thought you will be the best person to fast track projects. No choice. So I joined. In 15 months, again to cut a long story short, there are 4 chapters of that in my book. We cleared projects worth 5 lakh crores, unprecedented in the history of this country. And this was way back in 2013-14. It's been 8 years now. No one has come knocking on my door for having given a wrong sanction. It was an experience of lifetime because we used technology to the hilt. It was probably the first department in the government where we did not have a paper or a file. Everything was electronic. Everything was digital. And since everything was digital, here is another ethical, the technological part of how you can continue to be ethical. You know, it's easy to say that you should be ethical. I keep telling my colleagues, you can actually be ethical because you have the technology. How? Because if you put every decision that you've taken on the portal, malaf ID will never be attributed to you. You know, some of the case studies, they ask specific questions, what can be done in a particular instance. There, they are expecting you to think out of the box and provide long-term solutions to a problem that may exist at that point in time. This, to my mind, was a long-term solution of using technology to make the functioning of a department totally transparent so that even if something goes wrong, malaf IDs don't get attributed. In this particular case, it did. And there was another incident outcome of this. There was a very interesting outcome of this. One cabinet minister, she was sitting on files worth 54,000 crores. Everything cleared, she had to just sign the files, she didn't. And I was getting very upset. So I used to tell the cabinet secretary and send a note to him, in fact 3 of them, telling him that this is another scam in the making because the cabinet minister is sitting on the file not clearing. Soon the world will know that she is sitting on those files because everything there on the portal, it's all transparent. Cabinet secretary unfortunately didn't do anything, but I happened to meet Montek Singh Ahluwalia, who called me for a discussion, and during that discussion I narrated to him that there is another scam in the making because this minister is sitting on the file. He asked me whether I had spoken to the Prime Minister. I told him I had no access to the Prime Minister. So he said, I'll talk to him. I think he spoke to him. Then everything started happening. Still the minister was still there. So one day, again you can call it unethical, in one of the informal discussions, Mr. Oscar Fernandez, I don't know whether you heard of him, not very far from you, from Bangalore, may his soul rest in peace. I had worked with him, and in that informal chat I asked him, sir, are you aware that this lady is taking money in the name of the other lady? So he immediately got the hint. He said, yes, Anil, I have also heard. Then, sir, isn't it you? Now, Oscar Fernandez was very close to Sonia Gandhi. He was actually personal secretary to Rajiv Gandhi. So he knew them very well. So I told him, why don't you inform her that, I jokingly told him If the money that she's taking is going to the right corners, right place, then it's fine. If she's taking money in the name of somebody else and the money is not flowing, there is something unfair about it. I said it in jest. But I don't know what happened. 7 days down the line, the cabinet minister was asked to resign. Now, again, I had not expected this. I keep saying that. I was doing what I thought was right, in the larger interest of the nation or the organization or in my own interest. I thought that was right, I did it. Then I went on to become Coal Secretary, Government of India. I think we are running out of time. I'll quickly run through what happened in coal, because then I'd like to interact with you all. You know, it's much better for me to respond to your questions. I can keep coming back to these stories in case there are no questions, but I'll just narrate what happened in coal and then close it here. You know, when I was posted as Coal Secretary, almost everything that could have gone wrong had gone wrong with the coal sector. Though it was not as bad as it was made out to be by the Comptroller and Auditor General. There's a full chapter in my book which talks about where did Vinod go wrong in his RAE as CAG, and I'm now convinced that his calculations were absolutely wonky. There was some wrong done in coal block allocation, but not to the extent as was made out by the Comptroller and Auditor General. I have stated it with facts. No one has come back to me contradicting those facts. As luck would have it, the CAG comes from this state, he belongs to this state. A very fine officer, a very honest officer, but I am not sure whether he did that honesty as Comptroller and Auditor General. He played to the gallery. And what he did wrong, I am not going to the details of it. But when I joined the coal sector, the scene was so bad that when I walked into the Coal Secretary's room, you know, CBI was after officers, they were after files. No officer wanted to commit himself on the file. It was as bad as that. It probably was the first time in the history that as Secretary Government of India, I was making recommendation of what they were doing. Usually the routine is the file comes from the bottom, they give out the details and that you do it. And now since I was doing that, there were occasions when I committed mistakes. It's not that you don't commit mistakes. I did commit mistakes. But the good news was that since every order that I was issuing was going on the portal straight away, people used to ring me up and tell me, sir, this is not the lowest bid, probably the calculation is wrong, please have a look at it. And I remember having opened the office late in the night, recalculated and discovered that my decision was wrong. Next morning, first thing I used to do is to call a press conference, admit my mistake. My friends, this is very, very important. You should have the courage to admit your mistake, because without recognizing your mistake, without admitting that you commit your mistake, you'll never be able to overcome or improve upon that. So I used to admit that mistake. It never made a news, because if you tell everybody, then what's the news? It is when the journalists discover what is wrong that it's a news. But if you tell them this is wrong and you apologize, because it was not done deliberately, or everyone is prone to committing mistake, so I used to commit. If I did make any mistake, which I did on occasions, I admitted it and nothing wrong happened. Look at what happens in the coal sector. As a consequence of an absolutely amazing team that I had, from acute scarcity, which was the cause of corruption, which was cause of all problems, we worked on improving coal production in the country. From acute shortage in 2014, we came to a situation in 2016 where we were toying with the idea of exporting coal to Bangladesh. Now again, it's a very long story. It's a coal story, and how that happened, I am not going into the details of it. But what I am trying to convey to you is that if you have the willingness, the passion, the desire, the planning, the commitment, you can make anything happen. In fact, I could have re-christened my second book as Making Things Happen in the Government. Because normally what is heard is that there are so many problems here, there, you can't make things happen. But I have tried to give examples of such cases where things actually happened. There was so much positive energy in my room as Coal Secretary that we used to jokingly say that you give us the Kashmir problem, we just might be able to find a solution to that problem. And look at what happened thereafter. Two of my joint secretaries who were very much in the thick of it and made things happen in coal sector. One of them is presently Home Secretary, Government of India, and the other is Additional Chief Secretary, Jammu and Kashmir. In fact, they are jointly engaged in solving the problem of Kashmir, which we used to say jokingly, give us the Kashmir problem, we can find a solution to it. If you have a positive attitude and if you qualified for the UPSC, you'll be able to do anything. You don't have to be an expert in a particular area to deliver things. I didn't know anything about coal. I didn't know anything about education. But I am fairly satisfied with what I did. Because the attitude matters, because you can get experts for coal block auction, which was probably the first ever totally digital auction, no file, no paper, was not done by me. I got the experts who did it. But I had the attitude to get those experts here, give them that environment, support them that they could do it. I didn't have that expertise. I didn't require that expertise because expertise can be outsourced. But if I didn't have that attitude, even if I had that expertise, I wouldn't have been able to do it. Focus on what you have to do. Don't worry about what you will do as a civil servant. Don't worry about the problems of civil servant. Don't worry about politicians. Don't worry about issues over which you have nothing to do right now. You'll have a lot to do when you become a civil servant. We cross the bridge when you come to it. Don't worry about it unnecessarily. Focus totally on your preparation for the civil service. Don't waste a moment, but enjoy every moment. If you don't enjoy it, you could be in trouble. Thank you.